Hello, everyone. Good evening, and this is Sil, your host for tonight. And today we are joined by the team captain of YGG Elite for another session of an Axie Infinity Bootcamp for Origin. And for today, we're going to have a really interesting topic. We are going to focus more on the um, team building and the crafting guide. And this will be hosted by Disi. So Disi, take it away.
All right, welcome everyone. So for tonight, since we did a bit of the basics like last time with how to start with like origins, adventure, like the cards, the runes, the charms. So for tonight, since the alpha season is already like over, I'd like to share to you guys how you can start building your teams, your own teams for the next season, or if there are any teams that you're currently using right now and you want to like optimize it as well. So feel free to ask like questions while I'm actually trying to discuss it because I'm gonna go through all the teams that I think is like around right now, like in terms of their like classifications. And if you feel like your teams are actually part of it, you can just like ask it right away. So let's make it like a bit of like informal somehow in terms of like how I would discuss the teams right now. So first and foremost, there would be like I would classify all the teams into like three. I would classify it into aggro teams. So this is like very offensive comps. Um, we also have the stall teams. So this is like for the longer games, and we have those teams that we need to set up like in terms of different like mechanics into the game. So first and foremost, we can start with the aggro teams. So I'm gonna share to you like different like versions of it. The first version that we're gonna discuss right now is actually the front to back version of the aggro team. So front to back, meaning the approach of the axis that you have is to actually go through like front to back, like as is, like killing the front and killing the last axis, which is the back, unless there is like a taunt from your opponent that actually hinders that approach. So axes like that are those axes that doesn't have any like backdoors, and most of the cards that they have are actually like offensive cards. So some teams that I have right here in my team list is this one. So this team is a double plant with an aqua. So this is a front to back version, but there are some mechanics that we can utilize in this like team, which is like the taunt especially to distribute damage. But most of the stuff that we do here is that we try to kill the front first, and then we go to the mid and to the back afterwards. Other teams that I have here is this one. So most of the teams that actually has this approach are like the Aquas, the Beast, and the birds. So they usually kill their opponent like as fast as possible so that they prevent them from like utilizing some of their cards, especially the utility ones, where they try to gain like energy or let's say someone like different units like Mavis or like Hollows or something like that. So that is the first version of the aggro comp that we can build. So usually when you check the cards of this like aggro comps, it's usually just damage cards most of the time. And the utilities that you get from it is like draw cards and like extra damage. There are some with like of course you cannot like build any comp that is like very perfect unless you have the good amount of like budget for it. So most of the stuff that you have here are like damage like cards that just hits in front. So aside from the front to back, we also have the AoE comp, which is actually very used in the last like week or two of the alpha season because it's a bit like abused somehow because of the runes and charms that is around that actually makes it like very good. Like in terms of the rune like bloodlust or like the charms that increases the damage of the certain cards. So I don't really have a perfect like AoE comp, but this is one comp that I might try to explore at the start of the season. Usually when you're trying to build an AoE comp, this is still an aggro comp, right? When you're trying to build an AoE comp, usually you try to get at least like two like AoE cards in each Axie. So you can consider having like um maybe four to six AoE cards if you can. Because usually if you have like three AoE cards in one Axie, it tends to be like very expensive because it's not like common. And most of the time if you do that, you also try to get like other cards from different like classes. So when you're trying to build like an AoE comp, usually you just want to build the highest damage out of it. And as you can see right now, the way that I build this is that it's not the perfect one, but the way that I build this is that you have like a summon or like a taunt somewhere so that you can amplify the damage at some point. So in terms of like playing like AoE comps, it's probably like one of the like most straightforward ways of playing the team as well, or like the game. That's why it's really easy to play it during the alpha season, because it is where people say it like once you see the card, you just click it. Because most of the time, once you see an AoE card, especially at the start of like the game or like until the mid game, you just tend to like click it. As long as your opponent like has three axes on your on their like team, like three axes alive, you get the most out of the AoE cards. So your gameplay changes through the mid game or the late game when one of their axes actually die. But other than that, the approach of this team is very very straightforward. So another team that you could use or like consider as an AoE one is an aggro comp is the one with backdoors. I don't think I have much here, but one good card that actually uh lets you do a backdoor comp that is still very like offensive is a pocky card. So something like this. Because this puts like taunt on your opponent. So you have a chance of like sniping your opponent's like backliner. And another card is actually a shrimp. So the thing with this like builds is that if your opponent is built around like a and single damage team and like two like support like axes, if you can actually snipe the damage axis like early, you would see how the damage output of your opponent would like fall throughout the game. So there would be times that it would be like very very good. I would say that this approach would be very much like utilized in playing like tournaments or like competitive ones, because when you're playing like a ladder or like in the arena, the amount of like RNG included when you're trying to like queue is very high. So unless you know the meta, that's I think the time you should actually consider on building like a backdoor comp. But backdoor is really really nice, especially during the time when everyone was playing this comp, the one with buff, because usually the damage of this comp like falls off when the backliners actually like hit, even if it's not like killed, as long as his HP goes below like 66% before, the damage of this like whole comp actually goes down. So it's really really like how do I say it, like very conditional when you actually think of building those comps, but it's really really good before during that meta. So those are the three, I would say the three aggro comps that I could think of when you're trying to build comps. So again, it is the front to back, the AOE, and the backdoor. I feel like the front to back is the easiest one to build because it's very like straightforward, and at the same time, most front to back comps has cheaper like pricing as well when you're trying to build it. So when you're just like trying to build it, it would just differ on the meta that you're actually like playing. Like if there are cards that you feel like would be very very good during this meta, you just try to change that certain like part of the axis to actually make the comp like better. Also, like the AOE comp right now is still like very good. And as I said, the backdoor is, I would say, very conditional when you're trying to play it, but it's still very very good. So yeah, that's the first like classification of the team that I try to think when I am building a comp. Um, the next one would be a healing comp or like the stall comps. So this is just not like healing because there is another stall comp that you can consider, which is the shield comps. So it's either the healing or the shield comp. So I actually played both of it as well during the alpha season and before the alpha season. So as you can see, one of the utilized like cards before is the bumpy because it can create a lot of like shield. It's actually patched right now because before it's actually working well with the tick shield, such that you actually get the bonus like shield from the tick shield as well whenever you play a card. So this is another like version of like a stall comp, a shielding comp, and then we also have a healing comp, which is something like this or something like this. So before the healing comp is based around building like sakuras, but right now, since the meta is changing, if people hasn't noticed yet, the the healing comp is actually like adjusting to more like cucumber slices. So more cucumber slice, only one sakura, one gecko, and then you put like other shield cards in it. So what you want to do is to actually stack a lot of like so when we check the cucumber slice, what the cucumber slice does is to actually give you a healing boost. So in the current shift or like current meta that's happening right now, people are just trying to stack a lot of like healing boost because before they're trying to put like two sakura, right? But it's already limited to one. So in order for people to adjust with that like mechanic that they limited to only one, people would just try to use a lot of like cucumber slice instead, so that you still get the bonus like heals from this, while even only having a single sakura. And another approach that people are trying to do right now is to actually use a card called it's called clover. mm, the one that gives like leaves. Where is it? I'm using one right now. So this card actually gives leaves like um to the Axie. So a leaf actually generates, I mean, heals like HP at the end of the turn. So technically speaking, it's like Sakura as well. So it actually heals you too. So what usually people do when they're trying to build after like a nerf or like a patch is try to look for like alternatives when they're trying to build comps. So even if people are telling you right now that healing comps are kind of bad, I would say it's not. It's it's still very very good. The problem is, can you actually afford to actually get like an alternative, because your double sakuras might not be working anymore with your previous comp. So it's how you actually adjust with the comp that is like available. So yeah, if you're trying to build like healing comps, you can actually consider this like clover with a lot of like leaf build with cucumber slices. That's another approach that you could do. I'm not really a fan of healing comps and like shield comps. I just like played it a lot before so that I can get a feel of it. But yeah, I'm not really a fan of it because it takes so much time. So it's almost the same approach. Usually when you're trying to build a healing comp, you have to make sure that you have enough like cards to actually defend it. Like in terms of this, because this is not the optimized version that I played. So if you're really trying to build a shield comp, you might want to consider adding more shield cards here, so that you can make sure that every like turn you're not afraid of actually getting like killed, because you can actually put up good shields. And when you're trying to think about like the meta before, the reason why the carrot build, like the aggro comp that I showed you a while ago, kind of fell off at some point, is because the shield comps actually got popular. And with high shields, usually the carrot is so hard to utilize. So usually when people are like building comps or like going with the meta, you can actually consider which meta is being played right now as well, or like which is hot. And usually I'm the type of guy that doesn't actually like follow the meta. I always try to build something that is not like really popular, so that it's another like way of me trying to theory craft and like spend more time in the game, and actually get more cheap stuff too, because no one else is looking at those like axes during that time. So yeah, you always have to consider which is like being played right now as well, or like the meta in the during that period of the time that you're building. So yeah, those are the two like variations of the soul comps that I know. It's usually the healing and the shield comps. So the next one is probably the one that actually utilizes the mechanics of the game. So I would consider this like type of like teams, like a setup team. So since it's a setup team, it would actually utilize the cards, or like let's say the buff or like the debuff in the game. So I have three here right now that is like also like getting popular right now. So we have the curse comps. So trying to utilize the curse cards in the game, and then the bubble comp, which is another mechanic in the game that gives you extra damage. And then the last one is the poison, which is the one that I actually use throughout the alpha season when I grinded. So let's go with the curse comp first. So the idea behind the curse comp is that you're trying to put like curse cards on your opponents. So this comp is, I would consider it like a setup, because you don't actually get the value of it like immediately. So I didn't really build a very straightforward curse comp, but if you actually change the eyes of this one, because I was trying to get a cheap version before. So this is another like a curse card. So if you try to change the eyes of this, or like the back, you can actually change it to like um a sleepless or like a raven here that could also give like curse cards. Curse cards. So I consider it like a setup comp, because the curse cards actually show up in the second deck. So that means in order for you to reach the second deck, you might have to wait for like turn 9, 10, turn 8, 9, 10 before you actually get the value of it. That's why I consider it like a setup comp. So you actually deal damage. You are semi aggressive, semi aggro, because you tend to deal damage while you're actually shuffling curse cards on your like opponent's deck. So yeah, but at the same time, you only get the value of it on the second deck. So that's how I consider it like a setup comp instead, like not like an aggro comp. Because if you compare it to an aggro comp would just like destroy you in the first cycle of the deck. Meanwhile, even if you kill your opponent in the first like rotation of the deck for like a curse comp, your damage compared to an aggro comp would be very low, or like at least lower. And you get the value of the curse cards in the second rotation of the deck. So it is really nice. So I would consider this nice in like the mid or like the late, like how do I say it, like mid to late like part of the season, because in the mid or like later part of the season, you tend to get more like vitality cards, which means you can prolong the game more. So if you can prolong the game until the second deck, you can actually utilize this comp. But if you actually die very quick with like high damage cards from your opponent, like early, you might not take advantage of the curse cards that would actually be shuffled in your opponent's deck. So yeah, they're like when you're trying to build comps as well, you can actually consider, would this be good for like the early season, the mid season, or like the late season? And when you're trying to build like decks as well, or like the teams, like there are teams like the one that I use at least that could be optimized for like early season, mid season, and late season. And that's how I would like discuss it later with my poison comps. See the progression that I did to actually make it viable for the whole season. But it required me like resources or like access to play throughout the different parts of the season. So yeah, the the second version of the setup comp that I want to share is the bubble comp. I don't really have it, but I'm just gonna share you the cards that actually make it like possible, and also the rune. So if you check the runes of the aquas, there is this one called like the Heart of Ocean. So like every every turn of like every time you play your turn, you actually get like a bubble. And if you guys don't know the mechanic of the bubble yet, once you get like 3 stacks of bubble, you actually deal extra damage to your opponent. Like for example, on a normal bubble, you actually deal like extra 20 damage to all of your opponents when you use an attack card. But if you actually get this like rune, you actually deal 40. So this is another like setup that people are using in the higher like MMRs to actually dominate their like games because it really deals a lot of like damage, and it's also like pure, meaning even if like I am playing like a comp that has damage reduction, I would still take this pure damage unless you have like wall gecko or something like that. Also there are these cards. Oh, there's this like charm as well that gives you bubble. So this is called the bubble paste. Once you put it on a certain card, once you actually use it, it gives one bubble stack to that axie. I mean all the axes. So this is another approach that you can use to build bubbles. And then if we check the cards here, so there are like 2 cards from the aqua that actually we like builds bubble as well. So this is the most common one. This is called Gil. So this is the one that is being played by some of my friends as well. So you actually deal damage, and once you use like 3 gills, so usually when they build this like team, they tend to get like gill for each axis, like front, back, and mid. So that once you actually use all your gills, you actually get the bubble bomb. Meaning, when all of your actually utilizes all those bubble bombs and all the axes are alive, if you do the math, you actually deal like 180 extra damage, like 20 each, right? So that's like 60 times 3. So that's a lot of like extra damage that you can get. But the damage of Gil is pretty low compared to other cards. Like if you compare it to like Goldfish or like Riskafish that can deal like maybe 70, 80, or 90 damage, this one is pretty low. That's why it requires a setup. And then some other people are also building the bubble maker build. This one is more utilized by people who actually has the Heart of Ocean. Because the thing with Heart of Ocean is that it gives more bubble bomb damage compared to the normal bubble damage, because the normal bubble damage is just like um 20, right? But if you have like a bubble bomb and you get like 2 stacks of it, like 2 bubble bombs, you deal like extra damage to your opponents. So that is like 240, like 80, 60, 160, 240. So that's very, very big damage. So that is another approach of like high elo players that I actually faced during the end of the season. And it's really, really like good. Did you eat na? Yeah, I did. I did, Sparky. So yeah, that is the second classification of the setup. I mean, second variation of the setup, like team comp. And the last one is the one that I actually used the whole season, which is the poison comp, as you can see right here. So when I am playing the poison comp, and at least for the people who's trying to build like poison comps out there, the beauty of the poison comp is that you can kill your opponent with poison, and it actually makes them draw cards still. So that is probably the most beautiful thing a poison comp can do to your opponent. But the poison comp requires a lot of like, I would say, team building. because the idea behind the poison comp is that the tempo of the game is very very slow, right? So if the tempo of the game is very very slow, you might reach a point where all of your opponent's axes are still alive and you only have one axis left. So this is not really the final version that I played because I returned it already, but this is the idea of the comp that I played. So when I am building like a poison comp, I try to get like 4 to 6 like poison cards to the opponent. So what a poison does is that you try to spread the damage to your opponent, right? The best thing that could happen is that at least two of them dies at the same time. So when that happens, you actually take advantage of the of the like of the chance of them like drawing cards during that turn and make them like use only one or two energy when that happens. So how do I explain like when you're trying to build this, you have to know when to be like offensive as well or like defensive in terms of like using the card. If you guys don't know, the reason why it's viable is even if the poison only like applies like 3 poison to the opponent, the poison actually takes like 3 times. So if your opponent has like 30 stacks of poison, it actually deals like 90 damage to the opponent. So that is that is the thing that makes it really good. But at the same time, you really need to know how to know the tempo of the game. And if you're planning to build like a poison comp like early mid season, you need to value like taunts as well. So the reason why my comp is only like viable right now, I think in like high MMR, is because I have a taunt here. If I probably don't have like a taunt here, my game wouldn't like my win rate wouldn't be that high, I would say. It's gonna be like tough. So yeah, I'm just gonna like share more of the poison like. Alright. Alright, alright. So this was also a discussion with me and my teammates in YGG Elite because when we check the difference between calcium armor and leftover potion, all right, let's try to discuss it. So if you guys don't know, calcium armor is from an aqua. So what this thing does is that it gives you like extra 4% shield for your maximum HP. So it's every like at the beginning of your turn. Meanwhile, the leftover potion heals you at the end of your turn for the same like percentage as a calcium armor. So when I was like discussing this with my teammates, we were trying to think about like how do you actually get the value from like the calcium armor? You only get the value from the calcium armor when your opponent hits you. But if your opponent doesn't hit you, if your opponent like has like a back door, the leftover potion would actually be better because you always utilize this compared to the calcium armor. So when you're trying to use like a front axie, especially an aqua, I would rather use a leftover potion like rather than using a calcium armor. Especially like think about this. Um when you're trying to build like a front, maybe the one that you built is something like this. When you're trying to play this and you have like a calcium armor here, there would be times that you're actually using your taunt. And during those times that you actually use your taunt, you don't get value from your calcium armor anymore. So in terms of like the efficiency of the rune, you always get value from the leftover potion compared to the calcium armor. That's why I told my teammates that the only time that we might be using our calcium armor is if they change its percentage to maybe like 6 or 8%. or like higher, at least higher than the leftover potion. So yeah, the thing that I did before, just to try to utilize the calcium armor, is to actually like put a square teeth here. But I still realize that leftover potion is way, 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 way better than the calcium armor at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, if they actually like buff calcium armor, you can consider it in the future. But for now, since the percentage is the same with like leftover potion, you get the most efficient value from like the leftover potion, I would say. So yeah, double plant and puffy is good in 1K leaderboard. Right now it's not like viable anymore. I mean, it's still viable, but it's nerfed. So it might be difficult for you to actually play like get the same win rate as before. It's usually how the game goes anyways. Like there would be like buffs and nerfs at some point. And if you're affected by the nerf, you could probably see your win rate going down, especially if your opponents like your weakness comps also got like a buff. If your opponent's like, I mean, if your weakness like comps got a nerf, maybe it's still fine. So yeah, recommended build with double carrot and cactus. So when you're planning to build like a double carrot and cactus, that is considered as an aggro comp, the one that we actually discussed a while ago. I would say this is one of the most efficient way of building it, like putting anemone in front, because what anemone does is that as long as it lives and draws like cards, you actually get value from it from the anemone, because once you draw the anemone you heal, right? So I would say this is the most like balanced version of it, unless you have like a rune or charm that you can actually utilize somewhere. But in terms of like naked meaning there's no runes and charms, this is probably the most like optimal like version, or like most simple or something like that, simplest one. So yeah, let's move forward with I would say the basics of like when you're already playing the game, right? So when you're already like playing the game, so let's say we discuss this team. So when you're building comps, or like when you start playing the game, especially during the early season, the best team I would say in the early season is the team that can actually distribute damage. And how do you distribute damage? You distribute damage with the use of like taunts. So taunts like cactus or like egg bombs would actually help you distribute damage. So you can utilize it in early season, like when the damage of your opponent is still low, because when your opponent gets like high damage already, like runes or charms, the the problem with doing like taunts is that maybe when you actually do the taunt, or like the round that you taunt, your opponent can actually kill you too, and sometimes it's not like efficient because maybe you still have good cards remaining on that axis that you taunted. So in the early season, it's very very much fine, because the damage output of your opponent is still like low. Usually it takes your opponent like 2 to 3 turns to actually kill one axis. And let's say you have this like 2 tons, there would be like rounds that you can actually save this to. I mean, save the front and buy more like time for you to rotate your cards um until the second deck. And in terms of like axis that has like carrot or like Nemo, the value of your team actually gets low if you don't utilize it. Like if you don't utilize your Nemo, you tend to lose the tempo of the game by 1 energy. When you don't utilize the carrot, you don't get that extra damage that you can get for the first deck or like the second deck. So that is the value of taunts when you're playing a comp, especially in naked or like early season. So you can consider them as like damage distribution when you're trying to play the game already, or like still thinking about building comps. Distribution is very, very much important. That is why, if you notice, a lot of like people like in higher elo, even the healing comps are very, very, very good, because a lot of people were able to get this certain charm that I have as well. So like this card actually gives taunt. So even if you don't have a taunt card, since you have the charm, it actually elevates your team very, very much. Just because you can taunt and you can distribute damage. And when you're playing a healing comp, that is so good for you, because you know that you can sustain that taunt. And when the time is done, you get back to your front. You actually wasted your opponent's like cards already, and the tempo of your opponent's already like destroyed because of that. Because once you go back to the front, your back constantly heals, or like the Axie that taunted constantly heals again. So that is the beauty of it. At least for my team, it also works because some of my cards also heals. That is why when I get that like charm, I also try to build around it. So yeah. Another basic stuff that I could teach you is probably knowing when to go offensive and defensive on like certain games. So being like knowing when to be offensive and defensive depends in certain like stuff. So it's all about card counting, card management, or card tracking, right? So when you're already playing a comp or like a team, let's say you still have a lot of like cards. The most basic one would be here. So when when you're already playing this comp and you haven't used your Nemo yet, you can like play defensive. Like let's say your Axie has like 150 HP here. So in that round, you're left with like one energy, and you're left with either anemone or like a pumpkin. So the decision making starts there. Like, and you haven't used your Nemo yet. So on that round, you need to consider the fact that you want to get the value from the Nemo yet, instead of going offensive. So if you play like the defensive, you have the chance of drawing like a Nemo card that you can utilize before it actually dies. So there are times like that where you go defensive because you know there are cards like in this like certain Axie that you need to use first. And for example, there are also times like you want to utilize a card here, like let's say maybe there's a Nemo here as well, and you know that on the next round the damage of your opponent would be very high, because maybe it's the last deck of your opponent and you know that he haven't used like any Nemo yet, so probably it's gonna be a 4 energy card barrage or like something like that. That could actually one turn kill your Axie. So maybe if you actually taunt during that round and you still have like very good cards in your mid liner, it might die. So you'd rather let your front liner die instead than taunting that round. So when you're trying to go defensive or offensive, you try to see which Axie has more value, and which Axie you can extract more stuff when that Axie is still alive. So that's what I usually do when I'm also like playing my comp, my poison comp, because my poison comp has like a taunt as well, right? So usually if I know that I still have like healing cards here and I already use my healing cards here, I don't usually taunt here anymore and just let my front like actually take all the damage and let it die and wait for the second deck to actually rotate, and then I utilize my healing cards there when I'm already taking damage on my mid. So even if your comp is like well built in terms of like, oh, I have like a taunt here in this like certain Axie, and I'm always like safe in that scenario. But there's this part of the game called like RNG, or like how the cards actually like is drawn, and it would change how you actually play the game as well, right? So you have to adjust with that like RNG in the game depending on what is given to you, especially that the game actually changed recently because of the patch where it's actually slower because the energy distribution for you is 1 2 2 2, and there's a return approach already in the game. So with that, you can consider playing like a bit slower, right? Because you might only die on the third turn of your opponent and not on the second turn. Because before, the reason why the game is like very, very hard for turn one players is that most of the time, if you don't have any taunt in your team and your opponent gets like the turn two advantage, most of the time your Axie dies already. Like for your front Axie dies in turn four, and that is very, very bad in terms of like playing the game. Now the turn one is heavily favored because it has more energy until like turn five. You have like one energy advantage. So you're actually dies in turn five in terms of like turn four. So yeah. What else? So yeah, I think that's how I usually build my comps. Like right now, it's the simplest way that I could actually like share to you guys how you could build like early comps, like early season comps. I would say the value of damage distribution in early season is very, very important. So maybe if you're trying to build a certain comp, you might want to consider that. Even if you're building like let's say a poison comp or like a very aggro comp, I would say. Maybe this is just a tip for you guys as well. Like even if you're building a very aggro comp, like let's say the curse comps, if you can slot in one taunt card in the early season, that would probably give you a lot of like tempo in the game, I would say. So yeah, it's just a tip for you guys when you're trying to build a comp in the early season. Consider getting a taunt in one of your like axes. And there's a lot of like cards that actually has taunt. Um, so you can either use a shrimp. The Pocky doesn't give a taunt to yourself, but the shrimp does. Cactus does. Cattail, egg bomb, and yeah, discards. So the only like dangerous card here I would say is the cattail and the ant, because the cattail and the ant taunts you for like 4 turns, and usually for 4 turns you're already dead. So if you're building around like an ant or a cattail, make sure that you also have like healing cards or like other defensive cards to play around it, especially cattail because cattail is so offensive. At least ant gives you like shield when you use it. So yeah, if you're sniping axes, you might want to consider looking for taunt cards if you're trying to build early season axes. I mean teams. That's maybe one of the valuable tip that I could share you for early season. Because I'm also like building like different early season comps for now to test. So yeah. Do you guys have any questions before I try to share my story with my team building for my poison comp? For those of you who's actually like interested on building a poison comp, this is probably the one that I would be building as well. And before that, I just want to share to you guys what approach you can do again, because I think I shared this already in the previous bootcamp. For those of you who's gonna start the game early season, in the early season, I suggest that you don't rush on crafting intermediates for early season next time. So your goal when you're trying to build or like play the game next season, especially if you're not buying like NFT runes and charms of the market, is to make sure that you have enough like commons. Do not like underestimate like commons for early season, guys. Like when you're playing early season, make sure that at least all of your Axies has a charm on it and a rune. So that would be 18 I mean 18 charms at least. Wait. Oops. Wait. That would be 18 charms at least for you to be actually very efficient during the early season. So, and it's not gonna be like straightforward because it's still gonna be RNG. Because once you craft, you might be crafting like very bad like common runes as well. The best common runes that you might want to get for early season would be vitality. So I would rate the common runes. I mean common charms, I mean. My bad. Where is it? Common charm. Yeah. Where is it? Charm. Wait. Yeah. I would rate the common charms to be like vitality first, and then the next would be the um attack charms. And then next one would be either shield or heals. Just to put like extra slots if you don't have enough like vitality or power. But the priority would be vitality, guys. Like the damage of your opponent in early season would be lower, very much lower compared to mid season and late season. So as much as possible, complete all of your axes with like vitality stuff. And when you feel like you're already in that point that all right, maybe even just like 5 slots it's filled, maybe it's already fine. Then you can try to use intermediates. And when you're trying to craft like intermediates, it's up to you if you either want to get like runes or charms again. Because for me, I got very lucky with like the rune. I got like one poison touch very early, and I just built around that before. So after that, I just really aim for charms. So, but before that, um, of course, this is like very like RNG. But in terms of the like the math, um, because we noticed like one guild, the chosen ones, I think most of them has really good like runes at the end of the season. And what you can do is try to do their approach of like using one of these, one of these, and one of these if you really want to get like runes and charms. But it's really RNG. So the only thing that I could tell you is if you already have like good runes throughout the season, I would suggest you guys doing triple like greens. That's what I would do because I would want to get like better charms at that point. But if you're still looking for charms, I mean for runes, mix up like a blue or like an ancient moonstone on it. I also tried like two greens, like one blue, two blue, one greens. So just mix this up. Usually I use at least one green, and I never use the mystic. That's why maybe I don't have any mystic runes and charms too. So yeah, something like that. That's how I would approach my crafting even in season 0, and that's how I did it in alpha season. So I don't have much to be honest. Like I don't have like mystics, but I never aimed for it too. So my mindset is just go for epics and rares and build around it because the chance of getting mystic is very low anyways. So yeah, that's how I approach my crafting, and you might want to consider that as well for season 0. So all right, during the season, since I told you that I got like poison touch early, that's where my journey with the poison comp started. So it started with playing this comp, to be honest. It's not really a poison comp before because I also got Rise and Ruin, but I built around like it's actually not this. It's actually this. Yeah, this one. So it still ticks the criterias that I told you a while ago, right? Like there is a taunt here, which is the egg bomb, and I have like healing here to sustain the front. And yeah, since this is a stall comp, like I would consider this like a stall comp and a setup comp because I am in between a poison and a healing comp during this time. So this is where my team really started, I would say. Like it was really, really tough for me to play a poison comp before until my opponent, I mean my teammate actually told me he was able to get an egg bomb, a reptile. So when I shifted to this, the value of damage distribution is really, really felt. So that's how I realized that, oh shit, like taunts is really, really good in the game, especially during that time where AoEs are not like rampant. So most of the time people just go like front to back. But right now there's like AoEs, so maybe it's not that easy to build that straightforward. But it's still the idea of like doing taunts is very, very important. So yeah, and at some point I just got like a Venom Master, which is an offensive like um offensive poison rune, and then I shifted to it. I told myself, even during that time, I'm just hovering between like top 100 to top 200. So I just told myself that I'm just gonna try to optimize this like team the whole time and see if I could actually get like another rune that could actually be used um throughout the like season ending, right? So I didn't expect to get like two poison touch like this before. So that might be played with it. I bought a poison beast. Where is it? This one. I tried to buy this for season ending because I was hoping to get like a pangolin, but it didn't happen. But better things happened because I got another poison touch, and that is a time that I realized I have the chance of going for the leaderboards because I got a taunt, I got another poison touch, and I could just like stack like a lot of like poison to my opponents. And I remember like 3 days before the season ends, I was around 190 to 195 stars, and I ended at 200, almost 279. So the season is actually built around like getting like good runes and charms, but thinking about how to actually use it. Like I know there's a lot of like people who actually got like double bloodlust, which is like very, very good, but they cannot get the axes that are like fitted for that. So it's really not easy to build comps, I would say. You need resources, maybe you need like friends, because to be honest, this is the only axis that I bought uh during the season for my final comp. My mid liner, I just borrowed it from a friend, and then my front liner is from a friend as well. So I would say it's really hard to find the best team if you don't have the resources. So if if you were able to utilize a certain rune or charm, like kudos to you actually. That's why there's like if you guys don't know, there was an argument about like disenchanting stuff. So if you guys don't know, they announced like that you can disenchant like runes and charms in season 0. So it might not be final yet because they might be like deliberating on which is like the best approach. But right now, you can actually disenchant like runes and charms in season 0. So for example, I have like 44k here, right? If I actually craft it and disenchant all my stuff, this I cannot use this for season 0, right? But it would carry over there as like memorabilia or like collectors like thing. But you can disenchant it to make it like shards. So that is another approach that you can do if you really want to play the off season and maybe get a bit of like a boost for like season 0. But the ratio is like they were saying that the ratio is that for every like 100,000, it's just like 10% of the disenchant that you get. So that's only gonna be like 10k, and it still depends on your luck if you actually were able to craft like a mystic or like an epic rune or charm. So it would really depend on that. But yeah, if you need like another motivation to play during the off season, that might be a thing, because it's really hard to get like good runes and charms, especially if you played it in alpha season. So it really depends on like RNG. So if you have like friends or like maybe guildmates that you can ask if you get like a good rune or charm that you think might be used, always try to ask them. When I was playing with my team during the season, I never I think I never suggested my team to disenchant stuff. I I told them that maybe even in the last like week you can still utilize it. And maybe that's how I approach the game. I always try to get value from what I have first before disenchanting it, because the returns is really really bad. So yeah, at least that's my journey with my team building, guys. With like how I realized the value of the taunt is like very very important in the game right now, especially in early season. Maybe that's the thing that you can take from this like session when you're gonna try to build your own comps in the future. So yeah, if you guys have any questions with the teams that you're trying to build right now, maybe the I would say the floor is open for that. And while we're doing that, I could just like play some games for you to like maybe explain to you guys how I try to do the damage distribution, when to know when I play defensive or offensive. So let's try it here. All right, this is a bug that is still not fixed right now. Um when an AoE card is actually played, as you can see here, it actually takes like 2 poison stacks. So if it is not yet fixed until the season 0 starts, just make sure if you have an AoE card and there's like two, this is like very rare, because I don't think there's other people who's actually playing 2 poison touch like me. I think it's only me right now. So just make sure you don't hit 2 poison touch if you're using an AoE comp. So right here, my comp is like very straightforward. I just try to put a lot of like poison on my opponent, because the thing with my rune right now is that the higher the poison that I put to my opponent, the tankier I get, and it's capped at 20%. So meaning if my opponent has 10 stacks of poison, I get 20% damage reduction. And that's the idea of me building a wall gecko around it. Because if all of my opponents has 10%, all right, if my opponent has like 10 poison and I have like 20% damage reduction here plus the wall gecko, I could actually reach like 50% damage reduction. And that is how I built my comp when I was thinking about it. But wait, all right, let's try to play again before hopefully our opponent doesn't surrender early. All right, this is a comp that has backdoors now. Give me poison. This is a shrimp. So this is our weakness. As you can see right now, that was fast. As you can see right now, my team has a very soft backliner. I would say like, how do I say it's soft? Because this is a damage axis. This two is the sustain axis, as you can see. So if my opponent has backdoor and can kill my backline so fast, my damage would really fall off. That was fast. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So same stuff. You just try to put a lot of like poison to our opponent. And usually I try to think about whether I taunt in turn like 4 or 5 or 7. Yeah, glass cannon, like very high damage. Yeah, Giyu is one of the early poison players out there as well. I think Giyu has chomps as well and green thorns like small frills. I think the thing that he lacked for his comp was a taunt, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like if he has a taunt, it would actually elevate his like team more. So yeah. So I still need to put a lot of like so if I use this, right? This is still like a 3 card range for my opponent, I think. It might be a 3 card range because he has carrots. So what I would try to do to make sure that this guy lives for like one more turn is to put this. If this guy dies, it would just be maybe because he plays like 2 carrots. So I want this guy to live more before I actually do the taunt here. But since this guy has a shrimp, he goes for the back to avoid the shield, which is like very, very good for him. So our best case scenario is to actually get a taunt here now to actually like save both of them. But since we didn't get it, we're just gonna try to heal our teammates here. So we try to heal our teammates now and try to prolong the game more. Mm, yeah. And rare charms and runes, but sadly I'm unlucky. Yeah, because if you guys remembered or didn't remember, Giyu was actually in the top in the early season, and he actually built his comp well. That's what I would say during that time. And people still didn't appreciate the poison during that time. That's why I was so surprised that there's not a lot of people who try to build like poison comp. Maybe it's also rare. That's why. All right. So best case scenario for us right now is to actually put a lot of just like poison and prolong the game because our damage is really really low right now. So we have no other option. So since this guy might die, we can buy like 4 turns with this guy. And mm, wait. So the one that I'm thinking right now is that do I use Yam so that I have a chance of like putting this guy down, like Yam and Green Thorns, or do I need more shield to buy more time for my Axie here? That is what I'm thinking right now. Mm, I think I need to defend. Alright. Because when I check my deck right now, guys, I don't have my shield cards. I only have one left. So I am assuming that one shield card might not be enough to make me live. And then he used a Pocky, so that means I get like an extended turn for for my taunt. So this is gonna be like 6 turns now. So we just try to defend. We just try to defend here. We don't have any other option anyways. Put a lot of like poison and then just defend. The game is not that good for us now, but we're still gonna try to win it. So as you can see, the damage is really high right now against my opponent. It's just that he has heals as well. That's why it's not that felt, I would say. But the damage is really high. This guy might die in 2 turns because he takes like 87 damage. All right, we have one more turn, I think. All right. If you're not sure with how long the taunts are, you can check it here. So turn 9, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I still have one more taunt turn here. Um, we don't have much option. So let's just try to kill this guy with poison now. Because the reason why I wouldn't shield here anymore is because I am assuming that if I shield here, it's still gonna be a 2-card range. And right now, the best thing that could happen for me is to make this thing 2-card range. So when you're trying to think about like using shields in the game, you have to consider if is this a 2-card range or a single card range. The only thing that I miss on that one is the Jinx. So as you can see, it's still like a 2-card range, which is what we're actually trying to aim. So we just need to hit this a bit. All right, we just need to hit this guy a bit and defend for one more turn. All right. So this guy dies. I can shield here. And then best case scenario, I stun the guy at the back next. But this is like we're just hoping for the best right now because he already used cards here. Hopefully he doesn't have cards anymore. Because I remember him using 2 cards here. Right? So that means he doesn't have cards. Unless he got that. Unless he got that again. Wait, how did he get the carrot? I just saw he play the carrot. Wait, how did that happen? But yeah, so when I am playing the poison comps, it's really up to the RNG that I get with the draws, if he got cards on the dying Axie. But the fun thing about it is that there are games that you feel like you already lose, but you can still win it because of the RNG of the game. Oh, it got reset after the carrot. Yeah, I kind of missed that. But it's still like the RNG. And the backliner is still like healthy, so I have no other option. Usually the weakness of my comp is against Pocky and Shrimps. Because you can see my damage really like falls off when that happens. But in terms of like this like straightforward comps, most of the time I can win, especially with the Gila value. So I built this like thing with the Gila. So what happens is that if my opponent if my opponent has 30 poison stacks here, the damage would be like it's gonna be like extra 60 damage from Gila, and then another 15 extra damage from my rune. So it's really like a setup comp, I would say. All right, for this one we just like defend, build the poison stacks. Best thing that could happen is we actually taunt this guy in turn 6. If turn 4 we can still do it, but turn 6 would be the best if this guy doesn't hit that much, take that damage that much. Also, if you see your opponent like this, before, when there's not much bug in the game, when your opponent has like, all right, this is like next level. I'm not sure if it's like next level like thinking, but before, when I was like doing the games, if my opponent doesn't end turn at 0 energy, and I know they have like Cottontail or Nemo in their deck, I am assuming that if they took like 5 seconds longer to end their turn, they have a Nemo or Cottontail on that round. And on the next like decks, I am assuming that I'm only taking like 3 damage cards. I don't know if people think the same way that I think, but since I usually try to play very efficient with my games, I put that into consideration when I'm thinking about going defensive or like offensive in some of my games. maybe you can you can get something out of that as well if you're playing your games when they fix it already. But yeah, that's why when I am playing a chomp, guys, if I didn't see much cards in your front and I know that it's your last deck, I would just chomp your front so that you don't use other cards on it. You can't use any cards on it. So right now, we see that he didn't use any Nemo in front, right? So I could either wall Gecko here, but I also have the option of like stunning this guy so that he doesn't use that Nemo for this like turn. So that's my options right now. But I'd rather do the wall gecko at this time because I feel like he cannot kill me in 2 turns anyways. But that's the one that I am saying. He might get his Nemo this turn. Let's see if he actually gets his Nemo. Because usually your opponent uses. See, he actually used the Nemo here. Because we were counting cards. And he hasn't used any cards yet. And he still has 7. So it's like high chance he actually gets the Nemo on that turn. So if we actually chomp him during that turn, he cannot use his Nemo in the first deck. So you can consider that when you're playing the game already, right? It might be considered next level thinking, but that's how I think, especially when you have disable like cards or like utility cards like chomp, sleep, or something like that. It's very, very important to do that. Especially if you're in the certain like part of the season where you have like let's say a rocket stamp or like a sun stamp where you can actually hit any of your opponents and you know that he still has good cards there, you can actually like stun them. That's where you actually utilize card counting and card tracking, I would say. So this is the last round for us. I mean, if we don't use the Gila this turn, we can only use it in deck 3, which is very sad. Um, so I think we're actually gonna use our Gila this turn. And before we do that, I'm actually gonna put more poison. No. I'm just gonna defend the front and use Gila instead. Because this one has full HP. Alright. So yeah. The problem with like let's say you have alright guys. Let's say you have like 4 cards left on the deck, right? That means on the next like draw, you actually draw like 1 card from your second deck already. That means that the last 4 cards in your deck are the worst cards that you could get because those 4 cards would actually rotate on third deck. And that is very important when in like very close games, I would say. It's very important, especially with what happened to my Gila. So look, my Gila right now could only be played in deck 3 if I didn't play it a while ago. So there is that thing that you need to consider when you need to play like a certain card when it's mixed already with the second deck. All right. We use this in front. We heal here and then we kill this guy. And this guy also dies because of the poison. So I usually use my clover as like an extra like shield card if I use it late in the game. If I get my clover like early in the game, like let's say turn 1 or turn 3, I use it immediately. Because the thing is, you don't get the value of clover if you don't get it early. So I don't usually use it anymore. I don't take the value of it mid to late game. So the priority of that card just goes lower and lower. All right, how do we do this? All right, this game is already a secured game. Have they fixed the feature where if you kill your opponent Axie with poison and certain Axie cards is being drawn at the same time it does? Is the card still unplayable like before? Yeah. The thing is, I don't think it's really a bug. All right. My explanation with why I don't think it's a bug is that, all right, your opponent dies at the start of his turn. So the poison takes at the start of your opponent's turn, right? And that is the time where your opponent also like draws cards. So that means he draws cards before it's usually, I would say it's in the programming or like in how they program the order of the stuff, because what would happen is that they prioritize the draw cards more instead of the poison ticks. But if they did the poison ticks before the draw cards, that wouldn't happen. So I don't think it's really a bug right now in terms of their like programming. And also, you don't take advantage of the poison during a blood moon, if you come to think about it. Because during a blood moon, if you actually die from the blood moon and your opponent doesn't die and he has like 30 stacks of poison with like 10 HP left, you still lose because it doesn't tick. So I think there's still like pros and cons in terms of like using a poison. And I think, wait, did it get bugged? And I think it's just like the tempo of the poison is like very slow and it's not really hard to use for them to just easily remove those kind of stuff. Black screen? Oh shit. So yeah. You nerf. What happened? I think it got bugged. Oh, he didn't enter because he died from the poison, I think. Jen, do you have like any other question as well? He wants you to suffer probably. Like with any comps that you're building, because I might have experience with any comps right now. Like most of the comps that is out. At least if I didn't play it, I played against them. So if you're planning to build something, maybe this is a good time for you to ask those questions. Yeah. He didn't really like ended it. Want me to use all the time. So yeah, if you have like any questions, just ask it right now. Back screen again. I might be playing the last game for now. So for the next like boot camp, I am trying to build or like trying to get very aggro comp, like an AoE comp for you guys to see, because that one is like T card, click card. So if I can get a hold of that, that would be fun. Oh shit. So all right, when trying to be smart with playing the game, right? Sometimes you have to value your time. You have to value your time. And in this game, where he has a silence whisper, so what a silence whisper does is that instead of he taking like damage from like from the poison, he actually heals from it. So there would be a point here where if I feel like he was able to put a lot of like rosebud here in the middle, I'm just gonna surrender the game because I know that my time is gold and I wouldn't waste my time playing long against a healing comp. So yeah, if I can kill this guy immediately, I just accept the reality that I lose this game. And that is the thing with like playing Axie, you know? There's like weaknesses and strengths in the game. And it's gonna be smart for you to know if you can still like fight for it or not, when to give up. So I know I'm very much on a disadvantage in this game right now. So yeah, he wouldn't take like poison here anymore. And he has a cleanser, so I'm just gonna try to remove that and just end turn. I just the black screen police. And I'm pretty sure Giyu knows it. That my future is also dark here. Yeah. If they didn't, all right, if they didn't change the chomp, like if you can target the chomp anywhere, this might be way easy. Like no cap, but it's a different story now. So yeah, it's so dark right now. Yeah, it's so dark right now. So yeah, I don't think I can win here anymore. So when you're trying to build like a poison comp, the weaknesses that you might want to check on your opponent would be a silence whisper, rosebud because of the cleanser, a mint, a bidens, and a gecko eyes. And other stuff that would make you suffer, at least for me, would be watering can and timber. So yeah, it's just that I can't really win against this guy. So dark. Yeah, so do you have any other more questions, Sale? Yeah. Yeah, if you actually want to see how I play more this comp, I usually stream as well. You can follow me on my Facebook page. And yeah, most of the time I just play, and if I was able to tier craft another comp, I usually just play it on stream. So yeah, if you have like any other more questions, you can message me on my page. I do reply to people trying to build their own comps as well. So yeah.
All right, guys, you heard it from DC. If you have any more questions, please stay tuned and follow his page so you can actually be updated on his streams. And do you have any stream schedule, or do you stream randomly so people can actually
Uh
drop by?
yeah. I usually stream regularly like in the afternoons. It just got how do I say it, irregular last week because it's the last season of the week and there's like qualifiers that I needed to play. But most of the time I stream during the afternoons
All
for
right,
like
guys.
3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, you heard it from
And I
DC.
actually stream in Filipino.
Oh, Filipino stream. Do you
It's
still stream on Twitch, or is it only
oh
on
no no
Facebook?
no. Yeah, I stopped streaming on Twitch, but I'm also like considering it. But if I do stream on Twitch, it's gonna be on English. But in Facebook, it's gonna be pure Filipino.
Alright, guys. Again, if you have any questions, you can actually drop by on DC stream every afternoon. And once again, thank you so much, DC, for hosting this Axie Infinity Bootcamp. And hope to see you everyone next week for another session. Do you have a topic right now for next week's session, or are you guys still planning on which topic we're going to discuss?
I'm still like thinking about how I could make it more like intermediate or something like that. But the one that I'm thinking right now, at least, is showing more comps that people can understand, like how this comp is built, how you can like find alternatives for this, something like that.
All right, definitely. And actually, DC, you have access to the YGG stash, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, if you can actually do a theory crafting of some of the axes on the stash, maybe we can actually do that as well. So, some of the scholars who want to actually request for axes can actually get it. So, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's another good thing that we can do for that one. I will snipe it. Yes, I will snipe it for my scholars. And yes, and the last words, DC, before we actually close out.
Yeah, thanks again for you guys on coming here and supporting the bootcamp with me and YGG. And for those of you who were able to finish like the leaderboards as well, congratulations. And hopefully in the next season, season 0, all of us would be there too and get those sweet AXS.
Yeah, definitely. And I know a lot of people has been grinding a lot. Grinding so much for the AXS rewards. And guys, there's a lot of things that's still going to happen for Axie Origin. So always stay tuned for our Axie Infinity Bootcamp. And see you guys again next week. Catch me and DC there again. Alright guys, good night and see you again soon. Bye bye.
Bye guys. Good night.